Okay, here we have our E27 Fordson Malcolm Moore cableloader. It's actually an N model cableloader that was put on the E27 in about 1960. So it took quite a bit of engineering work. It has non-standard straight arms because with the higher height of an E27, the geometry was mucked up and the original arms wouldn't work. But other than that, the rest of the tractors, the rest of the winch gear, the loader is standard. It's a standard bucket modified with a higher back because it not being self-levelling anymore, it would have spilled over the back. Here's your latch gear for dropping the bucket. This is a drop bucket, so you tip your load, you drag back, you back up, you lower the bucket and drag it round so and let the arms drop. They sort of collapse as it latches. You have to have just the right amount of slack in the cables. If you have too much, there's inertia in the winch drum and it overruns when you're letting down. If you let it overrun, the cables come off the top and then you've got to climb up and put them on again, which is a bit of a pain, but yet you've got to leave enough slack to let the bucket drop over. She hasn't been going for a couple of years, but I turn her over every so often. I've borrowed the carby off it for me crawler, to be honest, and since then I've borrowed the front wheels from another tractor. But she is still operational. I worked it for about 15 years before I bought a more modern loader, and then she's been in preservation. The drive unit drives off the belt pulley. There's a bearing in here with an eccentric, and it rolls, and the wheel comes down onto what was the belt pulley. And now I've got this blind drive mechanism. They do wear here in the grooves, and you have to grind more on the small wheel, and you have to grind off the tops periodically to stop them bottoming out. Just like a worn V-belt in a V-belt in a worn pulley, and you have to replace the pulley. That is not live, so it takes a bit of experience to drive. Okay, that's your one lever. Normally the spring holds it back against the brake block. Then you have a neutral position between the brake block and the drive pulley, which is your drop position, and then you pull it right round, obviously, to lock it. You can see, well, I hope you can see, the wheel moving there. It has a camming action, and you set it on this adjusting rod here, this rod here, that moves the bearing on its base, and you set that for your engagement latch. At one stage you got a bit worn and it was actually half locking in, and the arms would go up, and there's actually nothing to stop them, and it was rather interesting. Now I've got it a little tight. It sort of should almost lock in, but it's a very fine line. We normally have a ball grader tyre on that side, but that's all for the moment. I'll explain why in a minute. Tractor come off an N because the N had it, and as we know, a E27 is the third stronger. The loader, I should say, come off. Here's the other side. One thing all these loaders have is the steering arm has been extended. You can see it's in twice as far. Of course, you lose lock because the steering box has only got so much sweep, but it's still quite all right. It has to be strengthened. One thing we found, is you'll note the adjusting lock on the tie rod end. Now these tractors always tow out when you go backwards, and it makes the steering very heavy, and backwards is the most critical time when you're backing up with a loader with a weight in the bucket, because she's quite heavy with all the winch gear and everything. So it's actually been altered so that's set up so that she's got toe in going backwards, and that makes all the difference to manoeuvring. Going forward you normally empty, or you're going straight, and it doesn't really matter. With the extended steering arm, when you're empty, it's quite light steering, and with that, it's drivable going backwards. That's the cross shaft here from the drive on the other side. You can see the pulley there. Comes across to a sprocket, runs up a chain to the main winch drum. This should be a spoke drum. In its life, something happened, forget what now, and the spokes shattered, and we had to plate the wheel side to get it going again. They're getting a bit of bloom there from the light. You can see it's been plated. That worked like that for another 20 years. Okay, Health and Safety love the cross shaft there in front of your feet and the open chain. You note the linkage cover plate. This tractor actually had linkage. It was a near new, well, not very old tractor, was bought on a farm, come with the farm, they already had newer power majors and that, and it wasn't really needed. And they bought the clagged end loader and swapped it with the intention of swapping it to this tractor. The tractor did have linkage, but try as they make, they could, shifting the frame around on the tractor, they couldn't get this to fit on over the linkage drive box, just would not work. So the linkage had to be removed. Tractor did originally have a full lighting kit. The end frame, the end tractor not having any mounting pads, they actually just clamp to the back axle on an end with like a big exhaust clamp. Bits have been welded on everywhere to pick up every mounting point. These are the standard Australian cast wheels. This is a Victorian tractor, so that most of these wheels were cast by Malcolm Moore. They're available in 24, 26, 28 and I think 30. And in different widths in the bolt together piece. This is a fairly wide one, so it depends what tyres you can run. I think that's a 16. Same with the fronts, they're cast wheels. They're available in 16, I think 19 and I think 30. I've never actually seen one to match the 30 rears. Round the back we have the counterweight, which has the thing Malcolm Moore Melbourne Limited. Now there's 2 counterweights there. Originally there was 4, we removed 2. That might sound a bit funny. The seats also have been borrowed. This tractor was often towed from farm to farm behind a truck, on F600. This is only the low speed box, 5 mile an hour, but it was commonly towed up to 15, 20 mile an hour without any ill effects. It growls and screams and carries on for a couple of miles until it all warms up. And then it all quietens down and you don't even know it's there, it just tracks along beautifully. The wheels are always locked straight by these clamps, and the bucket is lowered down and a bit of slack rolled out in the cable by releasing the winch and just hand rolling it out, and you just pull off a hole in the front of the bucket and it just tracks along beautifully. We just climb up. That's the bucket release handle. You can see the brake block there, which is just a wooden block, and all your normal Fordson controls. Of course, the pedals were cut and narrow to fit between the frame, the brake pedals. We come back around here, and there's the drive gear again. Now this drive gear isn't live. On a genuine E27 it's live. This is the normal belt pulley, which the gear drives off the input shaft to the gearbox. On a proper E27 loader, this is all smooth, and that is actually a brake material type drum, just on in place of the pulley. But inside the bell housing, there's a new gear, and that gear is bolted to the back of the pressure plate. So that pressure plate runs all the time. Here's the clutch is actually, there's nothing to do with it, and that is a constant running. Now that is good and it's bad in that it's live, but also means you can't stop it. With this, you can bang her into gear and then pop the clutch, and you can lift it very slowly, slipping the clutch. If you want to lift something precise, where normally it's just in or out, you have to drive it that way or you wear it. And it is very quick and very strong, but you haven't got precise control. Where with this one, you can slip the clutch and you've got fairly precise control the main clutch. We also use it as a clutch brake. We learned to do this. Common with E27s and other Fordsons, you can't get into gear. So you pull the clutch in, give the winch a tap, put some load on the gears, and that just stops the clutch instantly. And you can do it with the bucket up. The bucket hasn't got time to drop. You just give it a quick tap, and the clutch stops. We actually do the same with the linkage on all our other tractors. We just hold the linkage in topping out, and of course it's not been live drive. It puts a load on the clutch and stops it. We quite often feel like jumping the fence and throttle on people that grind their gears in when they've quite obviously got linkage. Just a little trick. Getting back to the grader wheel on here and the non-live drive, the technique we found out by accident in later years was when you push into a heap, of course you have a problem, you've got to stop and lift and then put back in gear and back out and all that sort of rot. What we found is we mainly loaded what we term around here bush gravel, which is alluvial buckshot, that you'll find in a natural gravelly bank. We'd usually pre-rip it with a chisel plough or something, and then you just load out of the ground. So you weren't working on real hard surfaces or anything. So what you'd do, you'd push in and you'd yank her up to heave her up and break out. and the inertia would lighten the back off. She was still plenty heavy enough, but it would lighten the back, and she would lift and roll, and the ball grader wheel, or lighten I should say, and the ball grader wheel would just spin, so she'd just sit there spinning the wheel. So you lift the load enough to break out of the ground and stop the soil spilling out the front of the bucket, and then using the clutch, using that as a clutch brake, you'd slap her into reverse and you'd back out still, and as soon as you stopped lifting, the tractor would settle down and grip, and you'd just back out and away you'd go. It was quite stable. It wasn't light enough to be unstable, but it was just light enough to let that wheel spin, and that's how we worked it all the time. But yeah, the ball grader tyre helped, and that's about it. In future tapes we will cover the Malcolm Moore Roadmaster power grader, which has the live drive I've just talked about to drive the screw jacks, and the Malcolm Moore mobile lift crane. That's all for now. Bye.